835 field.
Hey yo.
This is the Fantasy Den, presented by Buffalo Boxing Club and RotoSurance.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fantasy Den. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm here with Tom. We're getting ready to walk you guys through Week 11's matchups, talk about who you should be sitting, who you should be starting, and the rest of these guys, where they fall on the radar.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say we're coming into Week 11. Most 12-man leagues play 13 regular season weeks, and playoffs are 14, 15, 16. So really, it's down to crunch time. It's really at that point where it's win or go home. If you're at that point right now where you're 5-5, even 4-5, you still have a shot. But it's really time to win now, so just listen up and be prepared. We're here to help.
Guys, this episode is brought to you today by Buffalo Boxing Club. Make sure to check them out on Instagram as well as visit their website, buffaloboxingclub.com. And we're also very excited to announce that we're now affiliated with RotoSurance. Check them out at rotosurance.com. Buy insurance on your top player. They do NFL, NBA, NHL. If your player suffers an unforeseen injury, you get your money back from your entry fee. So you can't really beat that. It's a perfect safety net for fantasy.
Yeah, honestly, it's a really novel concept. It's something I wish I would have known about a season ago. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat as me. I was the number one pick last year. I drafted David Johnson overall, or number one overall. Obviously missed the season. So if I would have known about this a year ago, I could have paid the fee and then recouped my league fee for him missing the season. So it's a really great concept. You guys should get on board with them. Make sure to check them out, rotosurance.com. And on Twitter, I believe they're at RotoSurance.
And when you check out, make sure to use the code FANTASYDEN, all caps, all one word, FANTASYDEN. You're going to get 25% off your purchase. So you can't beat that, guys. Make sure to go check that out. All right, Tom, let's hop into it. Real quick, let's talk about some notes from around the league. Joey Bosa, defensive end for the Los Angeles Chargers, began practicing today in a limited fashion. So that's great news for them. He's avoiding surgery, and they're going to try and get him back in whenever they can.
Big news for the Chargers because they're in playoff contention for sure. They're not going to win that division probably because the Rams are there. Should get the wild card spot. And so it's big for them. Joey Bosa can come back and help this team a lot.
James Conner, they haven't said word on whether or not he cleared the concussion protocol, but he practiced in full today. So you know that he's trending the right way to play this weekend. So that's positive news, obviously, with Bell, as we mentioned on the last episode. And as everyone knows by now, being done for the year and no longer a Steeler. Brandon Marshall got signed by the Saints. Do we care about this?
I talked about it before. I think he's a lesser version of Dez just because he's a little bit older, wear and tear, but the same style of player, a big physical receiver who's a red zone threat. I can definitely see him catching some touchdowns for the Saints, but with that pecking order, he's going to be low on it, and he would be a really, really desperation flex in my opinion.
Very deep league speculative ad.
But again, with Drew Brees in that Saints offense, not the worst ad.
Tomorrow night's game, Packers go to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Important note here is that Chris Carson was taken off the injury report, so it looks like he's going to go, which just adds to the difficulty of trying to sort out which running back should be started. He looks like he's going to be the guy, but Penny's coming off a big week. We've seen Mike Davis flash some skill, so just bear that in mind if you have Mike Davis or you picked up Rashad Penny, a hot waiver wire ad.
Yeah, whoever's starting, you should be playing. The Packers are getting 121 rushing yards per game, so I like Carson if he plays. I like Rashad Penny if he plays. Mike Davis, I think, should be owned, but he's probably not going to do much tomorrow, especially if Carson's there. So I wouldn't really expect him to play. But again, Packers are giving up a lot of rushing yards per game. The Seahawks are running for a ton of rushing yards per game right now, and it's games at Seattle. So I think it's going to be a big game for Seahawks running backs.
In Detroit, Marvin Jones sat out today with the knee injury. He also sat out the fourth quarter this last weekend against the Bears. He's got a bone bruise going on in his right knee. So that's troubling. If he is to miss this game, it's just an increase for Kenny Galladay's targets and his fantasy outlook.
Yeah, and I do think this is going to be a sort of shootout game. I like Stafford this week. I think he has a big game here at home against the Panthers, so I like Galladay this week, especially if Marvin Jones is out.
Keke QT for the Texans, who was battling that hamstring injury. He was limited at practice today. He was also limited in week 9, so it looks like he's trending the right way. They're coming off the bye week last week, so there's a chance he'll play this weekend. And, you know, he's a guy who might be out there on your waiver wire or your free agent market. He might be worth stashing. We've seen him flash a little bit of that talent.
I definitely think he's worth stashing. If he plays in this matchup, he might be worth playing. Washington's the 8th worst against the receiver. Only 4 teams have given up more yards and touchdowns to wide receiver than Washington Redskins.
All right, guys, let's talk about some starts and sits for the week. One thing to bear in mind is there's 6 teams on bye this week. We got the Bills, the Browns, the Dolphins, the Pats, the Jets, the 49ers, all on bye this week. Bear that in mind. Let's get into these. Tom, who's your QB start of the week?
Well, I got a couple of picks here, but if I was going to pick one QB start of the week, it's got to be Carson Wentz. They're playing against the Saints. They're in New Orleans, which maybe scares you a little bit, but the Saints are the worst against the quarterback. Quarterbacks against the Saints thrown 19 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Wentz is heating up a little bit. I expect him to have a big game here. Should be a shootout game. The only Vegas has is the second highest scoring game of the week. The only game that Vegas projects to be higher is the Kansas City Rams, which is the highest Vegas projection ever for any game. So this is the second highest projected scoring game of the week. So I think there's going to be a lot of scoring here. I like Carson Wentz a lot. Another guy I like is Matt Stafford against Carolina. I feel like he's going to have a big game here. They're at Detroit. Carolina is the 5th worst against the quarterback. I feel like Stafford, he's probably going to throw a couple picks, but he's also probably going to throw a couple touchdowns. I just think it's a big one here. And 2 that might be a little bit off the radar that people may not be thinking so much about are, believe it or not, I got Eli Manning as the start of the week. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 2nd worst against quarterback in terms of points per game. They're at New York. Check out the numbers that QBs have put up against Tampa Bay's defense this season. 23 touchdowns to 1 pick.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think Eli is in store for a big one. Another guy I like that maybe people aren't as high on, maybe a little bit because what he did last week, is Dak. They're at home. They're against Atlanta. They are the 4th worst against quarterback. And quarterbacks against their Falcons defense this season, 21 touchdowns to 7 picks. Dak seems to be heating up a little bit. Cooper seems to be coming on a little strong. Dallas offense is starting to click a little bit here. So I like Dak.
Yeah, for me, my start of the week is got to be Russell Wilson. He's coming off a game last week where he ran for 92 yards. The Packers, believe it or not, are tied for the league in sacks. So that means they're going to be getting pressure on him. And I like a mobile quarterback like him. If they get to him, he's going to be able to make some plays with his feet. And I just like the matchup as well. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers need a win. I think it's going to be a good, close game. And I think it's going to come down to Wilson putting up some big numbers to carry them to a victory.
Yeah, I like both guys in this game. I think it should be an explosive Thursday night game. Interesting stat. On Thursday night games, Russell Wilson for his career, 12 touchdowns and 4 picks. So that bodes well. We'll see what he does tomorrow.
And for your sit of the week at quarterback, Tom?
I got to go Mitch Trubisky. He's going up against the Vikings defense. They are at home. But over the last 4 weeks, Minnesota Vikings have been the best against the quarterback in terms of fantasy points given up per game. And over the last 4 weeks, quarterbacks against the Minnesota Vikings, 2 touchdowns to 4 picks. I think this is going to be a game that he's very mediocre. I don't expect a big game here. I think the Vikings are going to come after him a lot. So I think Mitch Trubisky is a sit for me. I know that's really hard, and he's been super hot. That's hard to say, but I just think he's going to have a poor to mediocre game.
Oddly enough, in the same game, I've got Kirk Cousins as my sit. The Bears defense is no joke. They've been awesome this year, especially with Khalil Mack out there. Bears come into this game, 30 sacks, tied for 2nd in the league, and 16 picks, which leads the NFL. So they put pressure on the quarterback. They make them make mistakes. The defense is complete front to back, so I really like them. I think it's going to be a tough day for Kirk Cousins. And at the running back position, who do you think set up for a big fantasy weekend?
Okay, so I have a good one for you. Alex Collins. They're going against Cincinnati Bengals. They're at home at Baltimore. Cincinnati Bengals are the 2nd worst against the running backs in terms of fantasy points per game given up. They've given up 8 touchdowns over 1,000 yards. And then receiving, they've given up 523 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. So they're pretty much getting pieced by all running backs. I think Collins is going to have a big one here. Joe Flacco, right now it's up in the air if he goes. Harbaugh says he expects him to play today.
Yeah, he's battling that hip injury.
And now other reports are coming out saying it's a long shot. You don't know. If Flacco is out, I think that it hurts their offense, but I just think they're going to have to go to Collins more with no Flacco.
Yeah, absolutely agree. If Flacco sits, I think they lean heavily on the run game here.
And even if Flacco's there, I don't expect him to be fully healthy. And also with just how bad the Bengals defense has been, I think they're going to run the ball. So I like Alex Collins. Another guy I like is Dion Lewis. I think he's going to have a big game here. They're going up against the Colts. The Colts have given up the fourth most receiving yards to running backs this season. So only 3 teams have given up more receiving yards to running back. We all know Dion Lewis is a great pass catcher. He's been getting a lot of carries. They involve him. This is the kind of game where I think they're going to use him a lot and they're going to move him all over the field. So I think he's going to have a big game. Another 2 easy starts of the week for me would be Saquon and DJ, David Johnson from Arizona. And I say that because come on, these guys are first round picks. You're going to start these guys either way, but I expect big, big days from both of them. DJ is playing against the Raiders, who are the fourth worst against running back in terms of fantasy points per game.
Raiders have been just a dumpster fire.
Disarray. They're at Arizona. I expect them to just hand the ball off to David Johnson and let him run all over them. They're not going to have to do much, I think, to beat them.
Coming off a big game last week as well.
So I think that he's just going to eat. He's going to have a nice day. And then Saquon, Tampa Bay is the ninth worst against the running back. And I just think the volume he sees that they're going to feed Saquon. I know I talked about Eli could be a sneaky start of the week, and I still think that, but Saquon's right there. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring game. I think the Giants are going to put up tons of points. And Tampa Bay, usually they haven't put up points this season, except for last game. We'll see if they can keep up. I think they're kind of on a slide right now, and the Giants are kind of turning the opposite way. They're starting to heat up a little bit, so I expect some big, big game for Saquon.
I really like Zeke this week. He's coming off a huge game, 187 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Cowboys looked a lot better. They went into a hostile Philadelphia, and they won a good close game
against
there.
the run defense that coming into that game was absolutely outstanding.
We know the Cowboys' recipe for success relies on giving Zeke plenty of carries.
And since Cooper's been there, it's helping. It's opening up a little bit, letting their offense spread a little more, so should help Zeke.
And from a fantasy average, only 4 teams allow more points to the running back than the Falcons. So it's a great soft matchup for him. Sits, I'm really scared about Mixon this week. You know, they got a tough matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. No A.J. Green there, so it's just easier for them to key in and lock him down. Second best run defense in the league in the Ravens, and they've only given up 3 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to have to go with Phillip Lindsay. They're at the Chargers. Over the last 4 weeks, the Chargers' run D has only given up 158 rushing yards and 0 touchdowns. So I think that they're deadly right now.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Another guy I'm not high on this week is Josh Adams. Over the last 4 weeks, the Saints have only given up 243 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And I just think that it's going to be the kind of game where it's a high-scoring affair. They're going to score a ton of points. I don't know how much they can really get Josh Adams going. So I know a lot of people like him. He should definitely be added off the waiver, but I'm not starting him this week. I'm definitely nervous.
It's not a great matchup. The Saints put up a lot of points, which means a lot of times other teams have to abandon the run. On the year, the Saints have given up the fewest yards on the ground. So that scares you right there. Let's talk about receivers. Who do you like this week?
Alshon Jeffrey. Think he's going to have a big game here. Saints are the worst against receiver in terms of fantasy points per game. They've given up the most yards to receiver. They've given up the most touchdowns to receiver this season. So I think Alshon Jeffrey's in store for a big game. Carson Wentz seems to be heating up, seems to be playing with a little more confident, a little more rhythm. So I definitely like Alshon Jeffrey. I like Devin Funchess a lot this week. Over the last 4 weeks, the Lions have given up the most touchdowns to wide receivers with 8 over the last 4 weeks. I think he's in store for a big one. We saw what the Chicago Bears did to the Lions corners last week. Now Darius Slay may be out there, which changes a little bit, but I think Funchess gets in the end zone this week. I think he's going to have a nice week.
I really like Beckham against the Bucks. Coming off a big week, he's tied for 3rd in targets in the whole league right now, so he's getting the looks. Eli looked better last week. The whole team did. I expect him to eat this weekend. Going up against the Bucks, who've given up 15 touchdowns, second most only behind the Saints. One guy I'm not excited about in the same game is Mike Evans. Giants have only given up 6 touchdowns to wide receivers, so I'm a little nervous about him. Fitzpatrick looked a little shaky last week, not throwing for any touchdowns, so I'm scared off of him this week.
Yeah, I'm staying away from the Bears, guys. It's a home game for the Chicago Bears, which I do like. With the Minnesota Vikings defense, has only given up 6 touchdowns to receivers on the season. They don't give up a lot of big plays. I just don't see a huge day. I already talked about Trubisky kind of having a mediocre day, so I'm kind of scared off the Chicago guys. I don't think they're going to have a great game here. Another team that I'm a little bit nervous about would be the Falcons receivers. You're starting Julio Jones, no doubt about it. I get it. I'm not saying to not start him, but Ridley, I'm a little bit low on. Dallas has been good against the receivers this year. They're only getting up 6 touchdowns to receivers this season. And I just think that this is going to be a kind of game where he's not going to be heavily involved in it. Also, not to mention that only 4 teams have given up less receiving yards than Dallas this season. So I think it's going to be a kind of a slow day for Calvin Ridley.
All right, let's talk tight ends. I like Ricky Seals-Jones this week. Bit of a riskier play, but tight end's a tricky position to hit on, and there's a lot of teams on bye. I think he's worth rolling the dice on. He gets a soft matchup against the Raiders, who give up second most touchdowns to the tight end position. So I like him this week. I think you should fire him up.
Yeah, 2 guys I'm high on. I like Vance McDonald a lot. Jacksonville's kind of average against tight end in terms of fantasy points per game, but they have given up 6 touchdowns. Only 2 teams have given up more touchdowns to the tight end this season. So, and Roethlisberger seems to go to him a lot. I like him. Also, Austin Hooper, bit of a sleeper pick maybe. Definitely better in PPR with the targets he sees. Over the last 4 weeks, only 6 teams have given up more receiving yards to the tight end than the Cowboys, and only 6 teams have given up more receiving touchdowns to the tight end than the Cowboys. So I think Austin Hooper could be a good one here.
And what tight end should people stay away from this week?
So I got 2 for you, and people might say that it's crazy with the first one, but Eric Ebron. He's playing against the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are the best against the tight end this season. They've only given up 295 yards on the season and 0 touchdowns to the tight end position. They have a legit defense. The fact that it's in Indy definitely plays into the Colts' hands a little bit, but this is one of those games where I think it's a roll of the dice tight end. I think one of these guys gets in the end zone, but I think it's 1 touchdown for the 3 of them. That's Mo Alley-Cox, Jack Doyle, and Eric Ebron. Like I said, best in the league against tight end, having given a touchdown this season. So I really think they're going to shut him down. Another guy I'm staying away from is Ben Watson. The Eagles are the 3rd best against the tight end in the league. They've only given up 2 touchdowns receiving. Ben Watson is a pretty solid player, but if he's not getting you a touchdown, like a lot of other tight ends, kind of a bad play. I don't see him getting in the end zone in this one.
Yeah, for me, I'm staying away from Trey Burton this week. I have him in a lot of leagues. I love him. There's been a couple games where he just saved you with the touchdown. I don't think this is going to be one of them. In 4 of the last 5 games, he's seen 4 targets or less. So he's not seeing a ton of volume. I don't think that's going to change this weekend. And for streaming defenses this week, I like the Texans this week. They get the Redskins, who have been playing well, but that O-line is really beat up. Peterson is slowed down. So if I'm looking to stream somebody, that's definitely a team I'm taking a longer look at. And I also like the Cards defense this week. They get the Raiders. They're playing at home. And Jordy Nelson comes into this game, questionable with the knee injury. Martavis Bryant out with the MCL injury. This team is beat up, and they have been playing very bad.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders are just in disarray right now. Should be a good start. They don't have a lot of weapons. For me, I actually like the Tennessee Titans. I know some people are staying away from them because they're at Indy. Could be dangerous. They could score points, but the Tennessee Titans defense has been great all season. Probably a little bit underrated. Their last 2 games, they have 8 sacks, a pick, a fumble recovery. They've only given up 24 total points in the last 2 games. Those are against New England and Dallas. New England's obviously nothing to sneeze at. Dallas, some people may say not that great, but they're starting to heat up a little bit. I like them. I think they're going to get pressure on Luck. Luck hasn't been sacked a lot this season, so it's going to be a real battle between those lines to see what happens. But I like the Titans defense because they're fast and physical. They fly around to the ball. They seem to not give up a whole bunch of those big plays. And the Colts don't have a ton of the big playmakers, so I like the Titans this week. I think they could give you a solid play.
And a defense that's been a hot streamer that I'm staying away from is the Redskins. The Texans offense can get hot and put up a lot of points on these guys.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Redskins defense that much. I think that their numbers are better than they are in real life. I don't think they're that productive of a defense. A defense that I'm actually nervous about this week is the Baltimore Ravens, believe it or not. At first I was high on them thinking that this could be a good game, but the first time they played against Cincinnati put up 34 points on them, and their defense didn't do much. Now, granted, Bengals started hot, and they had A.J. Green there, so it was a different team, and he's very, very unlikely to play this weekend. But the fact that Joe Flacco might miss is what makes me really think about this game. I think that whether it's Lamar Jackson or RG3, me personally, I think it's RG3. I've been saying that for a minute. I don't like that start for the Ravens. I think that they could put them in some bad spots, meaning put their defense out in the field in some tough situations. So I'm not saying they're the worst play in the world, but I'm definitely tempering expectations. I don't expect a huge game from the Ravens, even with the Bengals not being in a great position right now.
All right, Tom, let's get into these games, start breaking them down. We'll go through them quick for everybody. Packers-Seahawks tomorrow night. We like the Seahawks to win this game. Who do you think, though, has a good fantasy day?
I think Russell Wilson has a mediocre fantasy day. You talked about him being one of your starts of the week. In 5 games against Green Bay, he's 2-3. He only averages 185 yards passing per game, only 36 rushing yards. I'm not high on that. I did mention he has the 12 touchdowns and 4 picks on Thursday night games. He is at home, so I like that. I think that helps him. I don't expect a huge game from him, just kind of a 15 to 18 point game, in my opinion, for Russell Wilson. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, I think he will be good. Rodgers in 8 games against the Seahawks is 6-2. He has 10 touchdowns to 2 picks. And Aaron Rodgers on Thursday night games for his career, 24 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I think he's going to have a big game here. It is in Seattle. That makes me more nervous, but I like Rodgers here better than Wilson.
And from the receivers here, rank them in who you think is going to have the best fantasy day. Devontae Adams, Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, etc.
Adams, Lockett, Marcus Valdes-Scantling. I might go David Moore over Baldwin, personally. I think David Moore actually gets in the end zone tomorrow.
And you think Jimmy Graham is set up for a nice day here? Does he get a touchdown for you this week?
Yeah, I do think he gets in the end zone, but I don't expect a huge day from him. I don't expect much more than that. They're going to kind of force feed him there, but I can see him getting the end zone with mediocre yardage day.
Let's go Cowboys-Falcons playing in Atlanta. Falcons coming off a bad loss. They get the Cowboys at home here. Cowboys coming in here after a big win against Philadelphia. What do you expect from this game?
I expect a big game from Dak Prescott, and big for Dak is probably a 20-point fantasy game, but you'll take that. Atlanta's fourth worst against the quarterback. Dak seems to be heating up a little bit, getting on the same page with Amari Cooper, so I expect him to be okay. Matt Ryan, I don't expect a big game from him here. They are at home. They have the explosive offense that helps, but the Cowboys have only given up 12 touchdowns this season. Only the Titans and Cardinals have given up fewer touchdowns all season than them, and their defense is pretty legit. If Sean Lee was out there, I would like it better. But you see Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith, the two linebackers, seem to be taking over. Dallas has an underrated defensive line, so they're good. I think Zeke's going to have a big game here. Atlanta's fifth worst against the running back, coming off of what he did last game. I think that they'll keep feeding him, keep getting him going. Only 4 teams have given up more rush touchdowns than the Falcons this season. So I think Zeke's in store for a big one. And only 2 teams have given up more receiving yards to the running back this season. Now, Zeke doesn't really do a lot in the receiving game, but that's really because the Cowboys don't use him that way. He's got the talent to do it. They just don't use him that way.
What about on the opposite side? A guy like Tevin Coleman, who we've seen the good, we've seen the bad from. Where does he fall on the fantasy radar this week?
I'm staying away from Tevin Coleman. Only 5 teams are giving up less rushing yards than the Cowboys. They've only given up 4 rush touchdowns on the season by the Cowboys. I'm staying away from him. They don't seem to give him enough carries and touches to get him really going.
Yeah,
so
Ito Smith seeing a good amount of that backfield share too.
Yeah, he's not really being productive with it. I know he has 4 touchdowns, but his yards per carry are not good. I'm staying away from the Falcons running backs.
And we already talked about sitting Ridley. We don't really like him against this Cowboys defense. Of course, you fire up Julio, and you're firing up Cooper. That's pretty much it in this game. Oh, and we do like Hooper, but we already touched on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, you definitely fire up Julio, but Calvin Ridley. Only 4 teams have given up less yards to wide receiver, and only 4 teams have given up less touchdowns to wide receiver.
Let's go Bengals-Ravens. I expect this to be a low-scoring game. I don't expect Flacco out there, and whether or not he is or not, I think they're just going to run the ball all day, rely on their defense.
Yeah, this game, I'm pretty much staying away from Cincinnati. All players, really. AJ Green's probably going to miss. Don't think Andy Dalton's going to have a big one here. I don't like John Ross or CJ Uzomah. The Ravens have only given up 8 touchdowns to wide receivers the whole season. They've only given up 2 touchdowns to tight end all season. So I think both those guys are not in store for a big one. I mean, CJ Uzomah only has 2 touchdowns on the season and 54 yards receiving.
Yeah, he's been bad.
That's
really has.
His high for the year is 54 yards receiving, which is obviously not great.
I understand people got excited about him. He had the added opportunity when Ross went down. AJ Green went down. Eifert out. But, he's just proved that he's more of a blocking tight end. He's not really an exceptional playmaker at the tight end position.
Yeah, and again, I'm low on Tyler Boyd as well. The Ravens defense is just shut down. Joe Mixon, I think, is going to give you an average game at best.
Yeah, if you have him, you're firing him up, but you can't feel great about it.
Well, Ravens only given up 3 rushing touchdowns to running backs this season, and only 7 teams have given up fewer rushing yards than the Ravens, so I think he has a very average day. Talked about earlier, I think Alex Collins is big here. Cincinnati's second worst against running back. Ravens receivers. This is a dart throw. If Flacco's out there, I'm way more comfortable playing them. If he's not, I don't think I would start either of them. But if Flacco is out, they're good. They're a good play. Only 3 teams have given up more receiving yards to wide receivers than Cincinnati all season. 4th worst in points per game to wide receivers and fantasy points per game. So I like them all. It's a dart throw with all these guys. Their targets are Crabtree at 76, John Brown at 67, Willie Snead at 69. So they're all right there. So it is a true dart throw.
Yeah, I don't like any of these guys. And I mean, I think if Flacco's out there, the matchup is nice because the defense is so bad for the Bengals. But I just don't see, if the injury is this bad with Flacco that he might sit or they might have surgery, etc. I just don't see them throwing the ball a lot. I think they want to get the ball out of his hands quick. So for me, these receivers are all a sit this week. Let's go Panthers-Lions. Playing in Detroit. Panthers coming off an ugly loss to the Steelers where they got creamed last Thursday. Lions have been struggling all year. Stafford hasn't looked like the same guy we're used to seeing. I know you like Cam this week. I know you like Stafford this week. How do you feel about Kerryon Johnson?
Yeah, I'm not big on Kerryon Johnson. Carolina's defense, they've only given up 4 rushing touchdowns on the season, and they're pretty good against the run in terms of fantasy points per game, kind of middle of the pack. I don't expect a huge game from Kerryon. I think Matt Stafford's going to throw the ball around a little bit here, so I definitely like Stafford more. Kerryon's kind of mediocre for me. I do think McCaffrey's going to be good. Only 3 teams giving him more rushing yards than the Lions this season. We know what McCaffrey does. He's going to catch it out of the backfield. He's going to carry it. He's going to be involved. So I think McCaffrey's going to have a big game here. Also, like I touched on earlier, I think Devin Funchess is in line for a big game here. Over the last 4 weeks, Lions have given up the most receiving touchdowns in the league at 8, and they've given up the 5th most receiving yards. So I think that Devin Funchess is going to be in store for a good game here. and the Lions tight end, whoever that may be. So Luke Wilson is listed as a starter. Michael Robinson is right behind him. We've seen Michael Robinson already this season. But whoever the tight end is, I think they should have a good game. Carolina is the worst against the tight end. They've given up 9 touchdowns to tight end. No team's given up more than that. So whoever's running at tight end for the Lions should be good.
And not to mention, Marvin Jones might sit this week. So more added targets and opportunity there. Let's keep it rolling. Let's go Titans Colts playing in Indianapolis. How do you feel about Mariota? We saw him put up a good game last week, taking on the Patriots at home. You think he has another good week here?
No, I think he's just an average play this week. I don't expect a whole lot from him. Colts pretty much middle of the pack against the quarterback. I just don't see him doing a whole lot. I mean, Mariota, even when he has his big games, he doesn't really do a whole lot in terms of, throwing the ball around the field. It's really a lot of his rushing that will play into it. The Colts, they've only given up 88 rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, but they have given up 3 touchdowns. Only Saints have given up more rushing touchdowns as a quarterback. So that's something to keep an eye on, but I expect a mediocre day for Mariota.
And who do you expect a bigger fantasy day from? Corey Davis, who's playing well, he's starting to really emerge this season, or T.Y. Hilton?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to take T.Y. Hilton in this one. I don't think he's in store for a big one, but if I had to pick between the two, I'd take him. Over the last 4 weeks, only 8 teams have given up more yards receiving to the wide receiver, and the Titans have given up 4 touchdowns to wide receivers, so I would have to take T.Y.
Is Marlon Mack set up for a bounce-back week here?
I don't think so. Tennessee is a legit defense. They're number 1 against the running back. They've given up 3rd fewest receiving yards to running back. They've given up no receiving touchdowns to running backs this season, so I don't think he's in for a big one. I think it's going to be kind of a hard day for the Colts to get going. I know people like them because they're at home, but I just don't really see anybody having a lot of relevance here. The Tennessee Titans defense is good.
And you think Derrick Henry keeps it rolling here? Coming off the 2-touchdown week against the Pats?
He's too hard to trust. I mean, it's one of those games. I just don't like Derrick Henry, the player. I've talked about it before. Yeah, he can get in the end zone. He could give you something to play here, but I'm not too high on it. I just don't trust him enough to put him in my lineup personally.
All right, let's talk about Bucks and Giants playing in New York. Buccaneers coming off their lowest offensive output of the season. I think they'll bounce back this week. Giants aren't great on defense, but they have some strong points to it. We talked about the Giants offense already. We think Eli has a good day. Odell has a good day. Saquon. What about Shepard and Ingram?
Yeah, here's what you need to know. Against the wide receiver, Tampa Bay is 2nd worst in fantasy points per game. Against the tight end, Tampa Bay is 2nd worst in fantasy points per game. Against the running back, they're 9th worst. Against quarterback, they're 2nd worst. So basically, fire up all your Giants because this should be one of those days where they eat. We talked about it before. I think Saquon has a big one. You mentioned Odell. I mentioned Eli. I think everybody's in store for a big game here. The only guy I'm nervous about is Evan Ingram. Tampa Bay has given up 5 touchdowns as a tight end, which is a lot. And like I mentioned, they're 2nd worst against them, but he just hasn't really gotten the rhythm going this season yet. Maybe he picks up here because Eli's starting to get going. Their offense picks up, but I'm a little bit nervous about him. Should be a good play based off the numbers, but I definitely like all the other guys on the Giants. I think they're in store for a big one. Eli, Odell, and Saquon, I think they're all going to have big games here.
Rank the Buccaneers wide receivers.
For me, it's Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson. Chris Godwin didn't practice today. He might miss the game, so even if, he's the 3rd one for me, and then Humphreys would be 4. OJ Howard is in the mix. When I do receivers, I kind of keep tight end separate, just for me personally. But
you think Howard's set up for a bounce back week here? Gets in the end zone?
No, the Giants are 9th best against the tight end. They've given up 1 touchdown this season to tight end. People have been talking about him. I think OJ Howard has a bad game this week. I don't think any of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are really going to be in store for the big game. In all honesty, I think the biggest play out of Tampa Bay is Peyton Barber. I think that he has a good game here against the Giants. They're 10th worst against running back, so I see him having a good game.
All right, let's talk about Texans and Redskins playing in Washington. Who do you like this week?
So if Chris Thompson plays, I love him. Only Kansas City has given up more receiving touchdowns to running back than Houston. Houston's given up 5. Washington obviously doesn't have a lot of big weapons, so they need to use all their guys. Chris Thompson is easily their most dynamic, explosive playmaker over there. So I like him this week. And then I like DeAndre Hopkins. Who doesn't like DeAndre Hopkins? I actually like Demaryius Thomas. I know some other people were saying stay away from him this week. Washington's the 8th worst against receiver. Only 4 teams have given up more yards to wide receivers this season than Washington. I think that he's going to have a good game here. I think that being in Houston is kind of giving him a little juice, a little revitalization a little bit, kind of getting him going a little bit. So I do like Demaryius Thomas. On the other side, I don't like any of the Washington Redskins other than Chris Thompson. The receivers are not being productive enough. Jordan Reed has not shown enough. So I just think that it's going to be kind of a bad day for Washington. I think Houston's going to eat. I think Deshaun has a mediocre day. Washington's right in the middle of the pack against quarterback. I don't expect them to have to do a whole lot to win, though. So I think he kind of has a mediocre.
Yeah, when the Texans play well, they tend to put up a lot of points. So I think Watson could have a nice day here. Jordan Reed, though, he has to be considered one of the busts of the year at this point. He has to be in that conversation. He's been awful this year.
Yeah, it's tough for me to go there because I don't know his ADP off the top of my head, but he was going, I mean, I'm almost positive I got him in round 10 in the league where I have Jordan Reed, and he was going, I think, around then or later. So I don't know if he is a bust just because of where he was going at. And then tight end is one of those positions where it's just so bad.
Yeah, and you might have an argument at the ADP, but, you know, at a thin position like
yeah,
tight end,
look,
this is a guy who was expected to do a lot more.
And just to kind of argue against myself, ADP doesn't matter now. ADP matters at the beginning of the season when we're all doing that draft stuff and you're doing regular. ADP doesn't matter now. It doesn't make a difference. So you might, you're right. He is sort of a bust. He hasn't given you much production. And, Jordan Reed's one of those guys where you just expect touchdowns, and he hasn't been doing that this season.
All right, let's talk about the Steelers and Jags playing in Jacksonville. Steelers coming off a big win against the Panthers and Cam Newton. No distraction with Bell now. Typical day for the receivers. It's going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup against this secondary for the Jags, but you got to fire them up. You can't sit these guys. And do you think James Conner's set up for another big week here? And would you rather start Leonard Fournette or James Conner?
You got to say James Conner at this point to what he's done in the season. I mean, it's too hard to argue against that. I'd like Leonard Fournette, but he's also one of these guys where he's an injury-prone player, so you don't really know on a week-to-week basis what he's going to give you. They're both right around the same in terms of fantasy points per game given up to the running back. So I'm going to have to take Conner just because of the production he's put up this season.
Any receivers for the Jags you would feel comfortable starting? Moncrief, Westbrook?
No, I would see Moncrief would be okay in a PPR league if I needed it, but there's not enough consistency from Blake Bortles and the receivers there, and they haven't put up enough production. So really the only guy I'm looking forward to starting on the Jags would be Leonard Fournette.
And if you had to stream a quarterback, would you rather play a guy like Blake Bortles or Ryan Fitzpatrick?
They're the same player. Blake Bortles is going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick when he's older. That's the exact same comparison. They both throw a lot of touchdowns and throw a lot of picks when they throw them. They throw in bunches, whether it's touchdown or picks. If I had to pick one, I would have to take Ryan Fitzpatrick just because his matchup is a little bit better. I expect him to be a little more productive in terms of throwing the ball around.
Yeah, I like his weapons better too.
Well, and it's more like now that Leonard Fournette's there, they know the key to success in Jacksonville. Turn around and hand the ball off to Lenny Fournette, and that's your best bet to win. So I would have to take Fitzpatrick versus Bortles.
And the Raiders-Cardinals game, not an exciting one. Is there anybody of fantasy relevance here?
Well, we talked about in the beginning how big of a game we expect from DJ. And really, Larry Fitz might not be the worst start, but you could probably do better. This game, the Raiders, I think Jared Cook and Jalen Richard are the only guys who are starting. Doug Martin could have an okay game here, but I'm not excited about the Raiders. Obviously, they're missing a lot of guys, and this team they're pretty much tanking. I think everybody realizes that, including the Oakland Raiders. So there's not a lot to get excited about there. Jordy, Martavis are out. You mentioned it. So the only guys I'd feel comfortable starting would be Jalen Richard in PPR and Jared Cook. I like Doug Martin, but I'm not in this game. I think the Cardinals are just going to be all over him. I just don't think he's going to have much chance for success. So on the Cardinals side of the ball, it's DJ, maybe Larry Fitz. Christian Kirk the last few games has not been productive, so you can't be starting him. You mentioned Ricky Seals-Jones might be an okay play here, but other than DJ, there's not a lot to get excited about in this game.
Yeah. Broncos-Chargers, this should be a good matchup here. Chargers have been playing awesome this season. They're 7-2. They get this game at home. Broncos, 3-6 on the season. They've been playing better than that, I feel like. No more Demaryius Thomas. So you're going to see more Cortland Sutton out there. We've talked about that before. How do you think his day goes here? You think he has a bigger day than the Williams brothers?
No. I do not like Case Keenum. I do not like the Broncos offense. I think the Broncos are going to struggle in this game. I talked about Philip Lindsay already having I think he's going to have a poor game. I don't think there's a lot here other than Emmanuel Sanders for me to get excited about on the Broncos side. So I'm not high on them. I do like Cortland Sutton. I do like his talent, but he just hasn't been getting enough targets and he hasn't been producing enough yardage to where you can really start him. He's definitely one of those guys that's a wait and see. If he has a big game here, I can see going forward, but you got to hold off on him. He hasn't done enough yet.
And do you like Tyrell or Mike Williams more?
At this point, you got to go with Tyrell. We talked about it before. He has better chemistry with Phillip Rivers because he's been there. He's already had some productive years with Phillip Rivers. He's a deep threat, a true deep threat. Phillip Rivers loves throwing the ball. I like Mike Williams, but his consistency isn't there yet. They're very similar players, but you can tell that the chemistry is just better with Tyrell. And I think after Keenan, Tyrell is the next guy up.
And Gordon's obviously a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Should be
Melvin.
set up for another
You're starting
top five.
Melvin every week, and I mean you're happy about it. Melvin Gordon, I talked about before. I still think he's underrated in real life, but man, he might be the most underrated fantasy guy out there. He is so consistent. He does it on a weekly basis, and nobody talks about how productive he is.
And we talked about the Vikings-Bears game quite a bit earlier. A couple guys we didn't touch on was Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs, both set to play this week. Tough matchup, though.
Yeah, Chicago's given up 12th most yards receiver, so I don't know how tough of a matchup it is. I actually think if they're healthy that they could be all right here. Again, you're starting these guys if you have them. I don't think you could really be sitting them, but I don't expect huge games from them. Actually, who I do think is going to have a good game is Kyle Rudolph. Bears are giving up 5 touchdowns at the tight end. Only 4 teams are giving up more touchdowns at the tight ends. I think that he's in store for a big one. I don't like Anthony Miller or Allen Robinson. Minnesota's the 4th best against the receiver. Only 3 teams have given up less yards to wide receiver than the Minnesota Vikings, so I'm not high on them. One guy I think that could be okay would be Tariq Cohen. 10 teams have given up more receiving yards to running backs, and 8 teams have given up more touchdowns receiving to running backs, which it may sound like a lot, but, think about it. 12-team league, you want to be that top 10, 15 team. So I think Tariq Cohen's in store for an okay game here.
Do you like him? Do you think he has the best fantasy day from the running back position?
Yeah, I
of all these
do,
guys?
because the Vikings, their weakness, it would be against receiving running backs. The Vikings against the running back this year, they're 7th best against running back, only giving up 2 touchdowns. So I don't think Jordan Howard has a big game. If they get anything going, I think it's going to be Tariq Cohen. And then Dalvin Cook, we need to touch on him. I don't know if you're going to start him if you have him. You probably are if you have him, but I'd be nervous about it. The Bears have only given up 1 touchdown this season. They're 3rd best against running back in terms of fantasy points per game. So even if Dalvin Cook plays, I don't expect a big game.
Yeah, he broke off that big play the last time we saw him out on the field. So that's probably why you're rolling him out there, just hoping that he finds a hole, uses his speed and breaks something off.
Not to mention he was probably a first-round pick for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you haven't been able to play him all season, so you gotta roll him out there while you can. Season's coming close to an end now, so let's move into the Monday night game, Chiefs-Rams. This is an awesome matchup. I mean, we have 2 of the best teams. We have the 2 best teams in the league, 9-1 coming into this game. First off, just from an NFL perspective, who do you think wins this game?
This one is so tough for me to call. I'm going to go with the Rams because of their defense. They have a better defense than the Chiefs. I think they're going to get pressure on Mahomes. They're at home. I do like that. I think they're more consistent of an offense, and I only say that because of what they did last season and then this season as well. So I'm going to pick the Rams, but this is one of those close games where, this is one of those games where, I could see this being like a 40-38 type game. I mean, it's going to be a crazy, crazy game.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts.
Should be.
Gurley's going to have a monster game here. No Cooper Kupp, as we all know. Josh Reynolds will get the start here. All these guys should be good plays. Everybody in this game is worth rolling out into your lineup. It's going to be a huge, high-scoring game. It's going to be a real shootout. Who do you think from the running back position, you think Gurley outperforms Kareem Hunt?
Yeah, I like Gurley better. I just think they're going to get him involved more. He touched the ball so many times out of the Rams' backfield with no Cooper Kupp. I think that's going to get him involved even more. So I do like Gurley better than Hunt.
And rank the receivers in this game.
So for me, I would go Tyreek Hill, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins, then Josh Reynolds.
I like it. I mean, it could go any which way, but I absolutely agree with the top 2 there. Cooks and Hill should both have monster days. I mean, Woods you can't sleep on. He's been a top 10 receiver through most of the season, especially partially due to the fact that Kupp had already missed 2 games. So I think he sees a really nice boost with him out.
He got an uptick when Kupp got injured and went out, so you expect it to just continue to go that way. One last thing I was going to touch on is I know that starting Gerald Everett or Tyler Higbee would be hard to do, especially at a thin position like 10, or even at a thin position like 10. And it's Monday night, so it's the last thing. But I just want to say the Chiefs, they're not good against tight end. Only one team's given up more receiving yards to tight end this season. That's Tampa Bay. So I could actually see one of these guys having a good game. That's the problem, though, is they're both dart throws. If I was going to pick one and you're desperate, I would go with Tyler Higbee. I think he's probably a better bet to get in the end zone. I know, I understand it. These are both hard guys to start, but if you're in a tough position and you need to start one, I think these guys are okay. In this game, that's going to be a high-scoring affair, and the Chiefs are bad against tight end. I could see one of these guys being okay for you.
Yeah, it's definitely a risky one. They could very well end up with no receptions.
Yeah, it's a huge risk versus reward, and obviously a lot of that's based on the matchup and the fact this should be a high-scoring game, so it potentially is there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it and watch that one. It's going to be a great Monday night. Thanks again for listening, guys. We really appreciate the support. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at The Fantasy Den. And thanks again to our sponsors, Buffalo Boxing Club, buffaloboxingclub.com, and as well as on Instagram. And make sure you guys got to go check out that rotosurance.com. Whether you're playing daily fantasy leagues or season-long leagues, you can still buy insurance for your season-long leagues. So get on that, guys. Ensure that if you have a player that gets hurt, you're going to get your entry fee back to your league. And they do all kinds of entry fees, whether your league is $50 up to $150, etc. It goes way beyond that. So check it out, guys. It's really changing the game in fantasy.
Yeah, it's a really great concept, something that I wish I would have thought of myself. It's just a really genius concept, and they're really doing a great thing. So go support them at rotosurance.com.
And when you check out, make sure to use the code FANTASYDEN, all caps, one word, FANTASYDEN. Get 25% off your purchase. You can't beat it. And don't forget to also subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Really appreciate that, guys. It does a lot for us. It's very helpful. And we'll be on Twitter all weekend, so send us your questions about your lineup, your trades you might be considering, etc. We're here to help you guys. Let's get a victory. Let's move on to the playoffs and get this championship. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time.